hear people say, like, I'm getting old, I'm 40. I'm like, what are you talking about?
Mhm,
If you
mhm.
feel that way now, my love, what are you going to say at 75? And what does that say to the people who are 75?
Welcome back to my little channel here on YouTube. My guest today on the Lisa Lacroix Show is the founder of Rosebud Woman, an intimate body care line of products for women, and the host of the Rose Woman podcast, a top podcast on love and embodied liberation. She's the author of 6 books on topics ranging from ritual and self-care to community, liberation, yoga, and more. And her career spans the range from global consulting firm, futurism, innovation, advisor, investor, and mentor. And in 2000, the year 2000, Christine began a 25-year journey studying and teaching yoga and tantra, trauma healing, plant medicine, and intentional living. She is the mother of 4 children, 4 adult children. She's the bonus mom to 2 and a grandmother. And to be honest, knowing Christine Marie Mason as I do, I can fairly say that that only scratches the surface of all this multi-potentialite Renaissance woman has explored and accomplished. Christine, thank you for being
Ah,
here.
thank you for having me. It's great to see you again. Thanks for all of the things you're doing in the world to make it more welcome and more beautiful for people of all ages and stages.
Yeah, I'm so excited. Well, first of all, let me say I'm so proud of you for this current accomplishment. Just yesterday, you published your, I believe it's your 7th book. Am I right? Or seven?
Nine.
You do so many things that who knows how you count all the programs and all the things. But anyway, it's definitely one of many books you published and a huge accomplishment detailing the 9 lives of women and how that, and I want to talk a little bit more about the title in a bit. But first, I want to say I'm so excited and happy to talk with you again because it's been far too long. And we've had an ongoing conversation around so many of these topics that we're going to talk about today over the course of 15 or 20 years.
Yeah.
You've been on my podcast twice, I've been on yours a couple of times, and we've been in similar circles exploring just the experience of women. And so I'm really excited to go deeper into this current
Thank you.
story you're telling and sharing with the world.
Thank you. I do feel that long arc accompaniment and witnessing of each other at the various stages in the journey is very profound.
Yeah, really, really important, really deeply felt. And I think indicative of how we women grow and change and how we do pass through stages and that we do it best together in
Mm.
resonance with each other. You've talked about that in your commitment to creating community, bringing people together to how we live lives in the broader sense. So,
Yeah, that was actually one of the motivators for the book. We did a survey in 2019, no, 2021, of the women in the Rosebud community on who they had to speak with about their sensual, sexual, and reproductive experience, and who could you talk to and who could you not talk to. And I asked them, husband or partner, doctor, friends, mother, and to a in every generation talking to their mother was the least easy. It was like on
yeah.
the scale of 1 to 5, an average of 1.6. And the idea that if you're not getting your information directly in your family line, how are you getting it? And sort of the sort of shame, the culture of womanhood shame that was being
Mhm.
passed, or the silence that was being passed, I really wanted to address that. I wanted to make a coherent narrative that crossed the ages and gave people places to enter into a new dialogue.
Mm, beautiful. Because we just
Mm.
don't have the places where we do that. So you're detailing those 9 stages. And I want to mention the title of the book and specifically talk about it for a second. 9 Lives of Women, Sensual, Sexual, and Reproductive Stages from Birth to Death, from birth to 100.
Yeah,
Did I
I
get it
picked
right?
100 because it sounded better than death, and most of
Yeah.
us get there. We cover like 99.999% of people by saying 100. Yeah,
Yeah,
but
exactly.
until your last breath, exactly.
And the
So
stage, the thing I think the thing I want to mention first about it is how thrilled I am that sensuality is named so centrally in the title of the book because it is one of the most neglected qualities of the feminine experience over time, the experience of women over time. The stages of life that we go through usually recognize the sexual, and they're almost always framed around the reproductive, as you note in the mention of the common usage of Maiden-Mother-Crone as archetypes based on our reproductive stage alone. And I feel like the sensuality aspect of our experience as women, which exists from birth to death, if we nurture it so, is so often missed and so important. So I felt a kind of aliveness and thrill when I saw that that was part of the title.
thank you. Thank you. Yeah, and also gives a little space for spirit to enter. Yeah.
Yes. Well, how do
Yeah.
you see spirit as fitting into that collective? And did you grapple with whether naming spirituality and eros more specifically in the title? How did you deal with the
I didn't
choice?
put it in there, but it's a through line in the book. Like
Mhm.
I, this sort of sense, and you could even feel into it, that you have a little spot in yourself that was the soul's essence that was there the day you entered the body and will be there the day you die. Like all your ages are one at once, and that little essence stays as the through line and is wrapped in these stages of embodiment that are changing. And that
Mm.
to sort of connect that essential self and your dharmic purpose, your core belonging, to the embodiment for more joy, for more joy throughout all these stages. Because I think a lot of times people do get very caught up in the external presentation or what's happening in the body, and that one of the findings on happy elders that's detailed in the book is that this sort of identity beyond the body is a critical part of aging well. So
Mm.
it is
I
right in this.
I 100% want to talk about the later stages because as I mentioned to you before we started recording, while I feel really deeply steeped in what you call the free stage or the free
Yeah,
chapter, the free
yeah, free
period,
period.
the free
It's
period.
a pun because you're free of periods.
Oh, nice. I didn't actually
And you're
get that.
also
I love that, the
usually at
free
that
period.
point about getting ready to be free of obligations to child rearing, and you usually have a little more money or like
Yeah.
stability. It's really a very vibrant time. But yeah, go ahead. Yeah, the
Yeah,
later.
I definitely want to talk about that because that's so central to the work that I do around changing the narrative on aging. And it is the chapter that I have been speaking about so much for the last
Right.
number of years in terms of reclaiming it, reinventing, and using it as an opportunity to take that freedom and to bring what we have to give into the world to experience ourselves differently. And I also want to talk more and hear about the eighth and ninth stages because those are stages that you call the glide. So I'm going to ask you more about that, not right now. And the what's the ninth stages?
Resolution.
The resolution stage. Those are stages that I don't know much about yet, that I don't have much leadership or mentorship for in my life, a little bit, and that are often we're somewhat disconnected from. So I really want to dive into those last three stages. But before we do, for people who are listening and who haven't got the book yet, and you definitely need to order it because it was released yesterday, so it's available, and we'll put the link in the show notes. But first, to name and give context around all of the stages as a progression, do you want to share about the
Yeah.
stages? Yeah.
So just to pick up on what you were saying around maiden matron crone, that the stages of a woman's biological development were labeled in reference to her ability to bear a child. As a maiden, you're able to bear a child, but you have not yet. As a matron, you are in your reproductive years and you've had a child. And as a crone, you are no longer able to bear a child. And those seem fairly limiting, particularly because of the time we're in. Like the women in this time are no longer bound by that childbearing decision, and it's not even tied to age anymore. So, coming from exactly where we are in history with the increased longevity of a woman's life. Like it's little known that we used to die just like men did in our early 60s, right after menopause, having a little bit of opportunity to be a grandparent and then die. But now you're living 20 to 30 years longer. Sometimes more. My guess is our generation will go even longer unless climate or something destroys that opportunity. And you're also extending the lifespan in the early stages, like the average age of motherhood, matrescence, first becoming a mother, moved from 22 to 29 now, almost 30 years old in the West. Now, so you're getting this whole earlier, this whole elongated sexuality without reproductive intent phase. Um, anyway, so with all of these changes, I wanted to really develop a new architecture around understanding embodiment. And I had the good fortune to run into a woman named Deepak Narayan, who wrote a book for Indian women called Chup, talking about the silencing of a young girl's voice. And she said in passing, girls don't just become 13 and having been silenced their whole life, be able to say yes or no to the demands of an adult or a predator. And it was like, I mean, we're parents. We know that you plant seeds when your children are young that come to bear fruit in their adulthood. But to include the stage of development from 0 to 12 that is that's before you even have your period, where you learn how to name your body parts, to feel yourself from the inside, to learn how to move and enjoy and take pleasure and read your body signs and cultivate your intuition. That all comes as a baseline on which your later sexual, sensual joy and conscious and intelligent reproductive choices rest. So the first stage is this laying the foundation of being an awake girl. And then the second stage is the stage between having your first period until you have your first intercourse. And I know all these, I put a little what do you call it? A disclaimer, sorry,
Like
disclaimer
a just
in the
yeah,
book, a
disclaimer
disclaimer
about the
that
stages being varied depending on what your
rigid.
personal circumstances are. Yeah.
Right. Like, there are girls who have sex at 14 and there are girls who don't get their period till 14 and it ranges, but I used the averages as of 2024 to date delimit the stages. And so first period to first sexual intercourse, which is 17 in the West, and to look at what are the issues in that window and the opportunities in that window. I remember first learning about the 4 stages of a menstrual cycle in my 40s and how to ride that and how to work with that and how to structure your life around that or how to deal with your own desire, like how to make sense of the feelings that are happening in your body, or how to deal with unwanted advances, how to deal with first love. All those kinds of questions come up in this stage. And then that lays the baseline for your active sexuality. But in this next stage of active sexuality without reproductive intent, now you're dealing with all the questions around birth control, and now all the questions about artificial reproductive technology. Should I freeze my eggs? All of those things. And so, another logical developmental stage is you're sexual, but you're not yet intending to become a mother.
Yeah.
And then there's a giant section in the book because there's so much going on in the years between making the decision to become a parent and hitting perimenopause. And it's a continued evolution of your sexual desire, of your erotic life, which I put a lot more of that into the third stage because it's there, it was available, but they build on each other. I also say in the book that if you missed one of these developmental stages, you can always go back. Like if you didn't develop that sort of intuitive ability to propriocept and feel into your body as an adult, you can go back and do that.
And I think that's really common because there is so much disassociation from that in many generations. For sure, I would say our generation and even the generation I see coming up.
Yeah.
So I think there's a lot of reclamation of that part that comes maybe at a different stage than would have been the standard, the standard.
I'm
One
definitely
thing,
portraying an ideal.
yeah, totally. The other thing I want to mention about this third stage you're talking about is I love that you call it matrescence, which is a word I've never heard before. And
Yeah,
it addresses one of the challenges that I've always faced when I talk about the mother stage of life, which is so needed to be talked about because it's so central to us,
right.
but that leaves out those people who either choose not to have biological human children or can't have them. And so I love that you found that word and you're using that word to name that experience in a way that's more expansive than just being the mother of children.
Yeah, that is true. And that is not my word. That is a word from a researcher in New York, but very underutilized in my opinion. And it
Yes.
puts the experience of becoming mother, in whatever form you're going to do it, as on par with adolescence and on par with sapiescence, which is the process of becoming a wise elder, and that it recognizes the transformation that happens in identity around that stage. Not just now you have more people to care for, but like you've become something new. And I also want to just point out another fact is that all throughout human history, 1 in 5 women have ended their reproductive years without having a child for a variety of reasons. But the data, the more recent data says now in cities like Tokyo, it's 1 in 3. And in the West, it's 1 in 4. And it looks like in this current generation, maybe even 1 in 2. Like many people are deciding it's just not for me for a lot of reasons. Also go into some theses in there about what those reasons are. Uh, and and that if you look at the people who are voluntarily child free or involuntarily child free, that they have a very different journey through this mid stage. And that even the women who do bear children or adopt children, the numbers now went from being almost four per woman to less than two, sometimes like close to one. And so you're looking at it's a very different story about the space and time available around that choice to do other things in your life and how long that phase lasts. So that middle section has a lot on everything from I put miscarriage and abortion in the prior chapter, but this has a lot on pregnancy. It has a lot on reclaiming postpartum care and the rituals around that, and learning from cultures that have beauty around that that really honor physical matrescence. Yeah, so that's the next stage. And then we go to perimenopause. Perimenopause is a whacked out part of a life because it doesn't have the overt marker of your menopause, of your full menopause, where your periods just stop, but your hormones are doing all kind of crazy things, and sometimes it's hard to tell. Is it culture? Is it food allergies?
Yeah.
Is it, what's amiss? And so just naming and educating on what's going on in that window, that's the perimenopause window.
Can I jump in on that to say that I what you just named, I want to underline it, that it is a period that's undefinable by our experience, which is why why we need to expand from those basic three where perimenopause is not included. And I'm seeing increasingly, because of probably the things we're going to talk about around medical and technological advances, where
Right.
people are increasingly becoming aware of, and younger generation is becoming a lot more aware of the impact, at least increasingly. It still has a long way to go. But there was no information about
No.
that when I was going through perimenopause. It was not something that was even thought about or talked about. And so I'm encouraged to see that even in advance of you writing this book and bringing this information to people, there's an increasing awareness of the impact of perimenopause on our bodies, on our hormones, and on our emotional lives.
Yeah, this is such a beautiful, I mean, because we've been with Rosebud in that educational intent around these things for 7 or 8 years, 8 years now, I guess. Oof, well, time flies.
Wow.
That what like menopause is just running out of viable eggs,
Yeah.
and the body just redirects its energy somewhere else. And when you start to see like what's happening in the body, um, it's not just hormones and menopause. There's also a biomarker at 44 for men and women, which is a whole bunch of different things that conspire at once to create a nonlinear leap in aging. At 44, which hits right in the middle of perimenopause, again at 60, so we're also dealing with some other real aging things that are happening in that window. So the average first menopause symptoms hit around perimenopause symptoms hit around 42, 43, but it can be as early as 38. And for most people, it's opaque. And so I talk a little bit about that. And then with sexuality in this phase, I call it increasing discernment.
Mhm.
Like you're no longer if you have been running someone else's script, this is the time to clarify and also to play a little bit more,
Mhm.
to like explore a little bit more on what's possible in intimacy.
Well, before we go on, I want to just go back for a second to this stage and go a little bit deeper for a moment. The reason being that when I am out in the world talking about changing the narrative on midlife, the midlife journey, I notice that the women who perk up about it surprisingly have been in their late 30s, early 40s. And I think that is because they can feel the sense of this impending stage of life that is can be scary in our culture. And more I've been talking to women, friends of mine in my communities who are in their 40s and seeing that they haven't necessarily started to think about what that trajectory is. And I'm feeling the desire for them to have more information about. So all my friends who are in their 40s, right now, start to read about perimenopause, start to read about hormones, start to understand what's available, start to understand the choices that you're going to have to be making and that you have the opportunity to make because our generation and generations before us were so disadvantaged by having misinformation and the Women's Health Initiative, all the stuff around hormone disinformation. And so, can you talk about maybe some of the things that you focus on in this period of life that can be empowering focuses, information that women in their early 40s who might be going through perimenopause might not think about learning on
Yeah, I mean,
because
there's so many.
there's
The
so
things
many I
that
know.
immediately came out was yes, pulling on the hormonal hit. I put a piece in there from Dr. Aviva Ram, an interview that I did with her on reclaiming your hormone intelligence. And that is often, hormones are so interconnected with our stress levels and our diet. And you can do supplementation and patches and creams and pellets and all kinds of things like that, which are totally viable. I heard someone say once that if you were short on thyroid hormone, you would never say, well, that's just it. I'm going to live with it for the rest of my life. That estrogen, estradiol, they play a very important role in all of the systems of the body. And if that's starting to fail you, you might just go for a patch like that. So getting clear on what you can do lifestyle wise and what you can do food and supplement wise and medication wise to address that. But I also think it's a very important time to begin decolonizing the stories of aging from yourself.
Mhm.
Like I did a piece, I did a big talk at, sorry, I did make the
No problem.
crochet. I did a talk at the American Academy of Sexuality Educators last June from one of the sections on the book. And the invitation was to this giant room of women to break out into threes and to begin to investigate the aging tropes that live inside of them. Like there's the sassy, sexy old lady. There's like the cougar. There's the sort of depressed widower, the cranky. Like there's a whole bunch of them, and we broke it down. And then to start to think about how the stories of aging live inside of you through your own family line. Like, how did your elders model what it was like to be 60, 70, 80? And for me, like one of my grandmothers was, putting on hard shoes and doing her hair in a Marcel wave at 95 and like ruling the house with an iron fist, my great grandmother Valeska. And then on the other side, I had a very vain grandmother who was very gorgeous when she was younger and identified sort of as a amateur Jackie Onassis. And as she aged, it was horrible for her, like to lose her beauty. And I do still see that in a lot of the anxiety of women in their 30s and 40s is what if I become unappealing?
Mhm.
And I just want to tell you that is an energy signature. There might be some people who only react to firm thighs and no wrinkles, but your attractiveness is an energetic signature. You're beautiful your whole life. And the right people are attracted. I just don't,
Mhm.
I think they need to also hear that.
I,
Um,
I I think that's beautiful, and I think it's true. And I believe that the conversations around beauty for women at all ages, but especially from the midlife on, is well, no, I think the conversation around beauty is a very complex issue for women in so many ways. It could be books, and I want to mention that somebody could say that's easy for you to say, Christine, because you're beautiful.
yeah.
You
Well,
know, like there's
I
that
am
complexity.
I am aware of my own hypocrisy on that. Like I
Yeah,
put a lot of time and treasure into that.
yeah,
I take care of my skin. I take peptides.
yep,
I feel the bias of beauty in the
yeah,
culture.
yeah,
I still notice like if I'm fit and strong and vibrant and my skin is shiny, it's not just like the shape of your face
right,
or whatever. It's like that's important to have the bio stack of a full vibrant life, you know.
yeah. Absolutely. And how that energetic impacts all of that. I guess I
Right.
just wanted to name that because I do think it has all that, the beauty is so complex in that way. And it, and the energetic piece is true. And we are impacted by how we're perceived and like, and it's all,
Yeah.
it's both and, it's all the things that we can care about what we look like and also be committed to the energetics and to our internal selves and to our spiritual selves. Yeah, just that it's so complex.
Yes, yes. I mean, I'm 59, so when I feel into the shift that happened, it was to feeling beautiful away from looking beautiful.
Yes, 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 yes.
And that is utterly an inside. That has nothing to do with what's in the mirror. I can be having a very beautiful external day and feel utterly ugly. And so closing the gap in the self-perception and like really feeling your joy and really being in gratitude and appreciation and in love for the other, like uplift the other and watch how beautiful you feel. So
Hmm.
just really making a commitment in this perimenopausal or midlife stage to know it's not going backwards.
Yeah.
Whatever you're feeling, just picture yourself at 90 as a radiant being and know you're going there and start to cultivate that radiance and lose the fear. Lose the
Hmm.
fear. It's so interesting to me to hear people say, like, I'm getting old, I'm 40. I'm like, what are you talking
Hmm.
about? If you
Hmm.
feel that way now, my love, what are you going to say at 75? And what does that say to the people who are 75, who are still like creating and radiant? Like, so examine the way aging lives in you in
Hmm.
this stage, and you'll be much happier when you get there, you know?
Absolutely. And starting, and what just to go back to the perimenopause stage, that you can start
That's
to be
right.
thinking about that then, because it comes much more into full force when you're in the next couple of stages. And we do have a number of stages to work
Yeah.
through it with.
I actually think these transitional stages are harder because you're not one thing or the other.
Interesting.
Yeah.
Yeah. I guess, I mean, I just turned 60 and I felt the impact of that transition more than I felt any other one. I had that the cultural narratives
Yeah.
rose up for a minute, and there was a part of me that's like, I don't want to say that, which has always been my stance, is say your
Yeah.
age. Let's change the way we see naming our age. Let's change our perception of aging. But 60,
Fucking
it's a new
hot.
one.
Can I just say you're hot? But I also I have that with the word, but I
Yeah.
don't care. I don't really. I mean, I had this near-death experience in 2017 and I really went out. I was out for days and it was like I'm just grateful to be here, you know.
Yeah.
My anxiety has nothing to do with how I feel or where I'm going. My anxiety has to do with the dating pool closing.
Interesting. Okay, talk about that then. Let's take a little segue into that because that is super important for my audience, for the people who are listening, regardless of age. It's a conversation that is up regularly.
Yeah, so I would say because of my lifestyle, the dating pool's already small.
Yeah.
You've got to have like spirit at the center of your life. You've got to be like committed to deep attunement and presence and creating beauty and being active and learning your whole life. So, all right, we're shrinking, shrinking, shrinking.
Mhm.
And then there's like the age appropriate story. I mean, anybody who's got adult children and is in a life stage that's matching mine would theoretically be a match. But then I noticed that quite a few of those people are choosing women who are in their 30s and 40s.
I just did a video on that. I will point to it here.
What? But what I'm also finding is a lot of the people who are 10 years younger than me are more than happy to date,
Mhm.
particularly if they don't know the number.
Mhm.
When they hear the number, they're like, "What?" And then I'm like, "Yeah, that's just, that's just what it is. What do you think?" And that's never an issue. But the initial screen, the number seems to impact the initial screen, you
Yeah,
know? And also, I
totally.
think the signature age of like being joyful and being cheerful and continually wanting to learn and grow and being devotional is an ageless signature. So that's what I'd say. And also, I just started dating, so it's not like I have a huge amount of information about that, but
Right. What you're saying
I'm
concurs with
ready for
it concurs with my experience for sure.
yeah,
Yes, all of it.
yeah, all of it. Sex is not. sex has been amazing in this stage, which
Yep.
I that's another big surprise as you look in the older stages. While penetrative intercourse begins to decline, the connection and the sexuality does not. Like as it's a craving the whole life long. I think in the later stages we also talk about the fact that the clitoris itself never ages. So
Yes.
we have that, ladies.
Yeah. And I'm wondering if this might be a segue into like what that brings up for me when you're
We're
talking.
yeah.
I know, and we'll pick up with the stages too,
Yeah.
but I'm wondering if we can pause here and like we're sort of in the menopause stage, and I'm
Yes.
wondering if that might be a good intro into talking about the focus on pleasure in the book, but because also my experience is
Yes.
that pleasure is something that comes a lot more in a way online in different ways at the older stages where we've either not had the time or the energy or the self-confidence or whatever to experience it deeply, and also your experience with Tantra and how that fits in. Because to me, they're very aligned with this stage in a lot of ways.
Yes, yes, they are. So we were just doing an exercise this morning. What would pleasure do? Like at any given moment, you can ask yourself, like, just sitting here and not feeling my body, like, what would pleasure do? Oh, pleasure would move my shoulders.
Mhm.
Pleasure would stretch. Pleasure would take a big breath. Pleasure would get up and dance. Like just asking that question in this moment, how can I make this easier? Or what would pleasure do? And that's a way of walking through through life. If you've grown up with the message that pleasure is somehow non-productive or something to be earned, that takes a little rewiring. But in terms of the Tantra, I studied classical Tantra, and that is a much broader thing than what is generally called Neo-Tantra or sacred sexuality in the West. And it has a very different worldview than any Western religion. So in classical Tantra, the idea is there is a unified field that we might call God or Shiva or something that contains everything, and the same energy runs through all of it. And when it condenses into an individual Lisa or an individual Christine, the job of that being, the only job, is to fully experience everything in your life, every sense, every sight, every feeling with your complete and utter attention, and then reflect that story of your unique embodiment back to God so that it can experience itself in multiple ways. And that it's utterly liberating because if that's your job to just fully be alive to your direct experience versus earning the right to exist or to be saved or sent to heaven or something like that, which is sort of the Calvinist Christian bias, like it's a very different way of walking in the world. All I'm here to do is to love, to attune, to feel, to experience, and let the consciousness know what is possible through me. And wow, what a difference.
Mm,
And so and that the important part of that in some ways is that nothing is outside of it, which means every physical object, including the non-physical ideas like AI, all of that stuff is enclosed within God. And also that drinking alcohol, eating meat, having sex, covering yourself in the ashes of the cremation ground and walking around naked, which is some of the practices the crazy tantric practitioners do in India. None of it is outside.
mm,
It's all included. What a level of tolerance. So that flows through the book, and in sexuality, neo-tantric sexuality became a particular focus of Tantra as it made its way west because it was a place of such contraction with us. We were drinking and smoking and eating meat and doing all kinds of crazy violent things that were taboo in India, but around sex, we were like this. And so that became a place of blossoming how those tantric ideas made their way westward. And they invite a balance in the polarity of the masculine and feminine in the self and between people that creates more attunement and more pleasure and more joy in your core relationship to another being. So I'm, enthusiastic about both the classical tantra and the neo tantra and looking at this framing of how deeply can I experience and love my life uh, through all the life stages is slid in sideways into this book.
beautiful.
That was a little monologue, babe.
Yeah, that was beautiful. No, it was fantastic and perfect. And you answered a couple of the questions that I was going to ask all at once. So it's beautiful. But maybe you
Ah,
can speak to this piece for me. I don't know if it's my experience in the world or my my time frame, but all the ways that you just described that experience of listening to and following what would pleasure want and being in the expression of love and beauty and seeing how it connects to all things. I experience that as pretty central to this free period.
Yes.
And I also see how there's a through line for all of that through all the stages, but it feels very central and omnipresent in the stage that I'm in right now.
It's a little correlated to what I would call the FU part of this stage.
Mm,
Like really, truly, Lisa, it's like my kids are raised. My
yeah,
company is
exactly.
built. Like
Yep.
I don't really want to be in a compromised position
Hmm.
relative to anyone.
Yeah.
And like I love collaborating, but there's a lot less of people pleasing and giving oneself away that accompanies this stage, which does create the space for
Hmm.
like what what do I really want?
Hmm.
What am I longing for and how do I follow that? And I would say maybe it's a legacy of our shorter lifespan at time that you do get the sense that it's not going to last forever.
Yes.
And that is a forced prioritizer,
Yeah.
you know, when you
Yeah, I
come,
think you mentioned that in this stage is
oh,
when we start to lose our parents, and
yeah,
so that brings us closer to our own, on average, again. I know you lost your family much younger, but it brings us closer to our own mortality, which has us question, how am I living and what do I want to do with this life? And then on the free piece of being free of, more free of responsibility, having more freedom through, largely maybe having more access to resources than we did in the past. That's something that's so incredible in the liberty it gives us to focus on the essence of what really matters: love, relationship, and it gives us the ability to come from such more place of generosity has been my experience because I
yeah,
don't need anything. I don't need a father for my kids. My I don't need. There's nothing I really need, which is also a factor in making the dating pool smaller in a way because when you don't need, how would I put this together? When you have a certain amount of freedom, it also limits the pool because you're moving through the world in a different kind of way.
well, you,
Traveling more.
and you might be hitting the patterning in the masculine that says, love, I have to earn love, which means I have to be needed.
Right.
Versus someone who's joining you in the exploration of what's possible, like in the beauty way, that we hit that with each other. Maybe I won't belong unless I keep your house organized and clean and
Mm.
give you like, good blowjobs and like unless I really, really be a good partner and I'm needed, then I'm not safe. Like that story lives in the culture too.
Yeah, absolutely.
So I think you're
Absolutely.
inviting a liberation look with this inquiry. Yeah, how do we do that?
Mm.
Uh, so free period. Well, we kind of skipped over this part of
Yeah,
active menopause, and it's a short window, and it is, some women don't experience anything. It's maybe a year, sometimes 2 years of like really heavy symptoms, and then at the end of that, like flatlining, and that is beautiful. Can we just say the first year after the symptoms are over, you're like, why am I so not moody?
totally.
Why am I so even keeled? Why do I not care what anybody thinks? And who knew that that was all hormones? But I mean,
It's one of the things that I tell women who are younger than me, and especially because I'm in communities where often I'm the oldest woman, and many of the women are in their 30s and 40s.
yeah,
And one of the things I notice when I see, especially because we're doing embodiment work and emotional expression and shadow work, and I see a level of intensity emotionally that I recognize, but that is not really my experience in a way because my emotions, sure, I still have emotions, but they're based on circumstance and a lot more steady rather than some random who
yeah,
knows what. And I've come to see it as part of this free period where I feel like a bridge between the masculine and the feminine in a way because it's,
yeah,
I think, more the experience of the masculine to have that steadiness. Like you see men who are steady and then remembering that I know that experience as a younger woman
Yeah.
premenopause, but I have this freedom. So it's like I feel like a bridge between an understanding of both sides of that experience.
I have very little tolerance for people's drama.
Yeah.
And I'm also in the same situation. A lot of the people that are in my communities that I work with are 10, 20, even 30 years younger.
Yeah.
And it's an interesting place to be to say, you know, find your inner steadiness and let's work from a strong, sovereign internal place and know when it's biology and when it's real. That you can also start at any age to begin to parse out what's your biology
Yeah.
and what's because that is like coloring how you see the world so intensely. The active menopause piece, which I'm calling metamorphosis, also includes the grandmother piece. And I know
Mm.
are you a grandmother yet?
No.
Yeah, because your
My
kids are,
kids are 26 and 20, but they're
you
not there
started
yet.
later. You
Yeah.
started later. Um, and that this is also a window when that's happening for a lot of women.
Yeah.
And that's another huge shift. I also talk about Louanne Bresendine's work in here on the upgrade, the way the brain changes when the
Hmm.
hormones change, and
Is it from the female brain, the book, The Female Brain?
the
Yeah.
upgrade from the book,
Oh,
The
the
Up.
up. I haven't read The Upgrade. I read The Female Brain years ago.
Yeah, she positions similar to what we're saying with the stabilization of hormones, that it changes mood. It also changes the ability to focus and other things like that, which she sees as an upgrade.
Mm.
So in this phase, you're really invited into crafting a new narrative for what you're going to do next, and to choose consciously to do what I call what is called a croning ritual or a sapiescence or a wisdom ritual. In many traditions, like in the Unitarian Church, for example, you become a crone either when you go through menopause, when you become a grandmother, when you turn 50, or at a time of your own choosing. Like
Nice.
you self-aligned.
I like that expansive range.
And so, to consciously to say, okay, well, this is the time when I get to claim all the wisdom that I've learned and step formally into that place. And if there's any element of competition energy with the younger generation or whatever, you release anything related to that and you commit to uplifting and helping grow the next generation, and meeting them and being of support.
Hmm.
And so this is a great time of life to re-examine what relationships in your life are supporting you. Is your marriage, your partnership, how is that going to morph and change? He's probably going through andropause, which people also don't talk about. It's a time to examine your own stepping in and claiming your wisdom years, and very potent, very potent. It's a time that deserves a great ritual.
Hmm.
Yeah,
Hmm.
yeah,
Beautiful. Yeah, I love the idea of ritual. I want to learn more about that. I feel all of the things that you just said as being deeply a part of my experience the last few years, even though I'm not a grandmother. I feel that energy in me, and like I
Mhm.
named it before as generosity. Feels like generosity, being
Yes,
able to uh, to serve. I say serve men and serve younger women in ways that I didn't have that space
yeah.
before. I didn't have that knowledge or that experience. So what stage are we in now? Orient me.
We
We're
just finished metamorphosis, which is
okay.
the end of the middle. So we've just gone through our full menopause. It's over now.
Hmm.
And now this last third of life, the last three stages, the free period, the glide, and the resolution. So if you look at literature, much of the published literature articulates postmenopause as 52 to the end of your life, which
Right.
seemed insane to me. As
Totally.
if you were not going to have any more defining stages in those 30 years, like crazy. So I went through all the medical literature I could find and looked at what it says about decision, like decisive points in aging. And there's a lot of data. 67 is one, and 78 is one, where you have these accelerated things that happen in the brain, in the way the body metabolizes sugar, in what's happening with joints, and then correlating that to the generational data in my surveys. And it looks to me like there are three defined stages and that they each have different priorities. One's sort of late 60s, one sort of late 70s, or like I put it at 80, and then 80 and beyond. So in they have their shifts that are happening in the spiritual life in those stages, in the physical life, in the way we relate and have sex, and what we want out of our sensuality. It's also overlaid with some pretty rough data on the fact that men die a lot earlier and women are often alone and can spend the last decade or two with no touch if you don't make a strategy, which is
Hmm.
extremely bad for your overall well-being. So in these last and you're also in the middle of in your 50s, usually 60s at the latest, saying goodbye to your parents, which puts you as the last defense with death. You're often learning how to re-relate with your own adult children and to become friends with them and redefine that. And your own placement in the web of life is undergoing a big transition. And so you've got cultural overlays. You've also got the overlays around no longer being interested or perhaps even being evicted from working because of age bias and having to reestablish what you're here to do. So I try to incorporate in these last three stages all of that. And then one thing I loved is much of the research on elders that like captivated me was on gerotranscendence, that there's something that happens to many older people that is now getting documented where the aging is accompanied with a sense of merging into unity consciousness very often throughout the day.
Wow,
As you
really?
slow down, you're like you're touching the one. And that what we imagine as sort of external and might judge as a slowing down is actually like the internal experience as reported by many elders is quite magical.
Wow, that is so exciting to hear. It feels a little bit like the things that I've discovered that I didn't know in
Yeah.
previous stages, that's a little bit of an insight into some of the potential beauty that we might not see until we get there. We might not be able to touch or know until we're there.
Yeah.
Ooh.
So the book synthesizes some of the habits of the happiest elders, the internal beliefs and the ways they approach life that are, it comes from about 13 different studies and interviews. And I do include in the early stages the biological stack, that it's not just stay strong or lift weights. It's like there are two predictable things, grip strength and leg strength.
And like, yeah.
Or there are these kind of motions. It's not just that you exercise, it's that you rotate all of your joints every day
Mhm.
because that stops calcification. It's not just um, you know,
Stretching your muscles or,
yeah, there's
yeah.
like very specific kinds of movements that predict whether or not your body will be the basis for a happy active life or whether you will become limited. And I put a little bit of the emerging signs of peptides in there, toxins, just to sort of lay that out. Because if you don't maintain the embodiment and you just kind of go gently into that good night, it is up to everyone the degree of intervention they want to take. I tend to the natural, so sort of the Ayurvedic, but I also take peptides.
Mhm.
And I know that there's a wide range of beliefs on that. So you find the level of intervention that you're willing to do and you try to keep the biology like really functional. And then let's see. So we're in stage 8 with that, and the sort of the science of health span versus lifespan, letting yourself. And then here's another trope. The crazy elder who's still doing fancy tricks on his skis at 75, or like that wacky race car driving granny. That's another trope, right? That's the exception. And to grant yourself the right to grow old with
Mhm.
joy versus fighting it, that is a critical developmental milestone of this age.
Just to be
Um,
clear, are you saying that being that trope is the granting of the right to grow old, or that is the avoiding
The
it?
opposite. I'm
Okay,
saying that there's a quality of like a pressure from
got
the
it. To be
culture
that
that,
wacky
like
skateboard riding.
you're gonna have to age like,
Yeah,
like you're gonna still have to be doing your dance moves and like,
yeah.
wow, she's so look at her go. You mentioned an older lady. No, I was on a call today and they mentioned an older lady who's in her 70s who just dyed her whole hair pink and like the cool old lady. Whatever, do that if you want, but don't do it because you feel pressured
Yes.
to present yourself in a certain way. So grant yourself the right to grow old and
Mhm.
do it in the healthiest and most beautiful way as you can.
In my model, that's the stage of the four that I have, which are optimization, reinvention, rebranding, and the last one is gracious acceptance. That is, you do all
Yeah.
the optimization, you do all the things, take the peptides, be a bi-directional learner, stay
Yes.
involved, stay vibrant, and then also accept that
Yeah.
this is also part of our trajectory.
This is amor fati, what is actually happening,
Yeah,
loving what's real.
yeah.
And then, okay, I also just want to pull out another piece from this stage. Some of the most important studies are where elders put their focus of attention, the ratio of past, future, and present. The more that an elder focuses on nostalgia of what once was, the less happy they are.
Hmm.
And the more they put their attention on the future and all the things that might happen, like running out of Social Security or never mattering again or never having love again or whatever, the least happy. They're the least happy. It's this quality of like drawing from your memories to boost your joy occasionally
Mm.
and thinking about the future in a sort of a creative way, like what you want to make or making plans or how you want to support the world, but bringing most of your attention into the now. And that the happiest elders are all about that. And that's actually probably a lesson for most of life, but that the people who are aging and they've stopped growing and consciously changing, the bias towards nostalgia becomes very strong. I'm reminded of that Glory Days song, you know, like you can't do it. It'll make you miserable. So no glory days, and cultivating this presence is a very important task of this stage to do it consciously. Yeah,
Mm. Ah, so beautiful. And also that through line of what does pleasure want in this moment, which
that's
could
right.
be physical or could be seeing a bird or enjoying the sun or, yeah.
Yeah, exactly. All of that. And then we're in the last stage, and I start that stage 9, which is 80 and up, um, with kind of a harsh message, which is if you're this old, you've already beaten most people on earth, and to be grateful for arriving there at all. And because there's a immense gap in the literature and the research on this stage, like it was very difficult to find first person narratives of this stage, gerontological research that doesn't pathologize or infantilize people in this stage. I did more first person interviews, like a woman that I interviewed for the podcast, Beatrix Ost, an amazing, amazing artist who just had a one woman show at 80, of new work. And it's like a grande dame persona,
Mm.
very beautiful. Like I interview her, and one of her core messages is that no matter the age, in your body is a good place to be. I interviewed people on sexuality at 80 and how that changes, and a woman who found, I did not thumbs up you, but
Something about Zoom does that.
sometimes it's just like, here, hearts.
Yes, I love it.
So crazy. Okay. So this is also the piece where you start to look like you might doubt that you will continue to create. And actually, there's a huge body of evidence for endless creativity well into your last breath. So we emphasize creativity. I talk in this stage about the body of knowledge around gerotranscendence, which we pointed to earlier,
Mhm.
looking to elder athletes and that there are women who are setting records in their 80s, running, track and field,
Weightlifter, what's her name?
mountain biking,
Yeah,
and not in that like defiant, I'm going to be so like young way, but in like, I just love my body and I'm going to keep doing the things I love my whole life long.
yeah,
And the fact that, you're losing everybody.
yeah.
By this point, you're often last woman standing.
Hmm.
And living with that loss and living into like building transgenerational friendships, uh, thinking through legacy, resolving anything that you haven't resolved in the relational field that needs to be cleared, and then really living fully in this last twilight part of life. And my hope is because each of these chapters and stages ends with like how to empathize with someone, an abstract personification of someone in this stage, like to really think through all of the complexities of what is on their plate, informed by their biology, much less their own individual circumstance, so that we can start to build this and weave this story and create a holistic picture of the beauty that's available in each stage and the challenges in each stage across the lifespan. And not write anybody off, not diminish the young, not diminish the old, not pathologize or what's the word I want to use? Like, we've designed a lot of systems that favor the masculine body, which by default puts the female body as a disorder,
Mhm.
and
Yep.
I feel like if we looked at that differently, we would be designing beautiful different systems that accommodated that, not demonizing or thinking of it as an exception. So that's the hope. That's the
Yeah,
hope.
beautiful. And I love that the book begins with a view to what's possible in terms of the way we regard the experience of the woman's journey in the world. And it's not exactly what exists right now. So I really appreciate this work, which I see as being such a contribution to our understanding of our own and each other's path through these stages. And I really look forward to getting to the last chapters because those are the stages that I feel are a mystery and it's going to be a real gift to get more insight into those ones. So
I would love to see more
more.
academic research on this.
Hmm.
That I doubt that'll happen with all of the cuts in funding that are going on right now, but we can lean into some of the things that are being initiated in Europe on gerontology. But I
Hmm.
think we could also just be interviewing and documenting the direct experiences of the women we know in those stages.
I mean, I personally lean in the
Story.
direction of direct experiences,
Yeah.
as an informant. I'm not academically oriented so much as I am first person and learning from the individual stories. So,
Yeah.
yeah, go
Yeah,
ahead.
on that, like you'd be surprised at what passes for research is often just a collection of 15 individual stories where the
Yeah.
keywords are highlighted. So often you, as a making an attempt to do unbiased interviewing and gathering that data, you're doing something that is as valid as an academic study.
Yeah, the qualitative research approach is definitely, interesting for me for sure. So I want to say thank you. Is there anything that we should know? We're going to put the information about the book. I want people to get the book, although I heard it sold out. The first round is sold out. So can we get it? Is it
Yeah, it's
possible?
available on Kindle, and then you can order the print copy, but I didn't know how it was going to sell, so I was very pleased that
So you'll
people
do
would.
another run soon once you get orders?
It's already on order, but yeah.
Okay, great.
So I feel what I would like to say is every single chapter in this book has so much more content. Like if you want to double click on any piece of that, I'm available for questions. I'd love to do book talks. I'd love to see this like opened up into sort of a women's conversation with women and their friends, particularly if you can craft something with women of multiple generations who are coming together to talk about the direct experience. Way prior to doing this book, I put up a list of 100 questions you could ask your mother about her sexual life and her reproductive experiences. And the first reaction I got was like, I could never ask my mother this. And but when people do it, it like blows open the relationship between mother and child and mother and daughter. So, and then the other thing I want to say is I've been speaking a lot about the book as a something for a woman to read, but I had two of my pre-readers were men. And in the middle of the second chapter, the person who was reading, a man sent me a text. He said, I had no idea.
Wow.
I had no idea what the complexity and what women were dealing with and what the biology entailed and how it worked. And every man should read this book.
Mm,
It's like you have made my day, month, year with that affirmative response as
mhm.
this being a vital read if you're in a male body also and you have women you care about.
I love that you're presencing that. I know for myself personally, one of my biggest commitments in the world is to heal the differences between the masculine and feminine in us as humans and in ourselves so that we can have more connection, so that the possibility of love in all of its forms is available to us as a humanity. So I love that you're presencing that collective viewpoint of this
Yeah,
work.
and I would go the other way, I also enjoy learning about the male experience and what happens. And like, I'm just curious about humans, Lisa. Like, what are they
Mhm.
experiencing? And how do we live better together all the days of all the days of our lives, you know?
Mhm.
So thank you so much for being interested and
Mhm.
having me on to talk about it and, being
Oh,
an
I'm
ally.
always interested in everything you do. I love how you bring together research and science and your big brain with your heart and spiritual context, and I just your poetry and art and humanity, and I just always adore everything that you do. And so I'm always happy to touch back in, even if it's only once every year or two, to find
Well,
out
hopefully more
more.
frequently, because
Yeah.
I've been watching your work in the relational field and polarity and very intrigued. I really would like to double click on that with you.
Yeah, for sure. Well, we're overdue for an in-person connection too, so
Thank you for your
yeah.
radio.
Mwah. Love you. Thank you so much.
Bye.
Okay. Bye.